So then, the international break is finally over, and that means there's no time to wade in misery over those 3 defeats prior to that break. It's time to refocus because, of course, it's an absolutely huge game coming up next. It's Manchester United coming to Anfield on Sunday, and as usual, been speaking to Arne Slot at the AXA Training Centre just over my shoulder. He looked really tanned after a nice holiday in the international break, seemingly, but he also looked ready, and he was in really good form ahead of this biggest of football fixtures, I would say, in all of English football, really. And I'll start with the key news, really, the team news as always. And of course, you may have noticed that Ryan Gravenberch went off at half-time against Finland for the Netherlands during the international break. Might have been a little bit of worry about that. Now, of course, subscribers to my Substack at davidlynch.lfc.co.uk found out a few days ago that that withdrawal was purely precautionary and that it was expectation that Ryan Gravenberch would 100% be fit for this game. And now Arne Slot has confirmed that story. It is worth subscribing. I will always emphasise that by saying today, when asked about Gravenberch's fitness, that Ryan is completely fit. So they expect him, if he doesn't have any issues in these next 2 training sessions that could pop up, a little kick or a knock or whatever, that he will be in the starting 11 to face Manchester United. Of course, there was also concern about another player in this international break, which is Ibrahima Konate. He didn't play a minute for France and then withdrew ahead of their second fixture. So he was asked about that and his fitness, and he said that he did withdraw from international duty, but he's expected to train with us today. So that is good news on Konate. So hopefully both of those in the starting 11, because there's no doubt for me that they are in Liverpool's strongest starting 11. And of course, one man we know won't be part of that, and not a surprise to hear this update from the manager, is Alisson Becker. He said of him, the end phase of rehab can always give you positives or negatives, but he will not play in the weekend or midweek. So we know that he's out of the Manchester United game, out of the Eintracht Frankfurt game, but we'll maybe see after that, maybe suggest that after that he will at least be close, but we'll see how we get on in terms of that. But a big opportunity for Georgi Mamardashvili in Alisson's absence, that's for sure. Now, in terms of fitness, of course, not an injury for Alexander Isak, but we know his fitness has not been quite right since he came into the club, has it? So, of course, he was asked about that and where he is up to, and he said, and he said this for a while, really, that Isak's been on his pre-season in this early part of the season. The idea was that after this international break, he would be fully fit. And it seems that Arne Slot is kind of sticking to that as his theory for where Isak is up to. He said, fitness-wise, he is close to the player he can be, so we can judge him in a fair way from now on. So I think that tells you the expectation now is that we are going to see the best of Alexander Isak after this international break. And that's exciting. Bit of a worry for Manchester United, I would say, because we know how good a player he is, but very, very exciting for Liverpool fans because they are going to see the best of Alexander Isak now, and the best of him is absolutely brilliant, quite frankly, isn't it? So I think very good news on that front. Very interesting to see whether he does start this game or whether the manager goes with Ekitike. But I'd say a fully fit Isak, if that is what he is one of the best centre-forwards in the world. So for me, absolutely has to start, but we'll see on that. Now, in terms of other talking points, of course, nobody could shy away from the fact that Liverpool had lost the previous 3 games coming into this international break, and obviously that's really poor results-wise. But I thought the manager was interesting here. He pushed back on the idea that Liverpool have been absolutely disastrous in this run, and I have to agree with him. I mean, obviously 3 results, 3 defeats like that, it's not good, and it's not what you expect from Liverpool. But I've seen a lot of talk as if there's been absolutely no good sides of these performances and nothing to write home about at all about them, that Liverpool were terrible from start to finish. I don't think that's the case. I think second half against Crystal Palace, very, very good until they concede that late goal. I think the Chelsea game, probably the dominant team up to 80 minutes, and then Galatasaray, for me, the poorest really performance of all 3, but it had similarities to Red Star Belgrade away in the season that Liverpool won the Champions League. That can happen to you in Europe. I don't think it's all been bad, although there has been a lot of bad in there, absolutely, and I think the manager agrees with that stance, really. He said, talking about the general malaise around Liverpool, he said, we don't create as many chances as we did at the start of last season, but we are still the team that creates the most XG from open play. And he did concede this, we have conceded too many goals. And he highlighted, actually, one interesting thing about that is that he obviously wants the defending to improve, and he's absolutely right to highlight that. But he said that we've conceded 4 set-piece goals, and he says that's too many. And kind of interesting, he seems to have a little bit of a bee in his bonnet actually about set pieces in this press conference, talking that Liverpool are conceding too many, they aren't scoring enough by any means. He spoke about the fact that Arsenal, 60% of their goals have come from set pieces, which, by the way, I think he's right to point out, is that sustainable? Is that does that mean Arsenal are free-flowing? And the way people talk about them is if they are this perfectly balanced side. I disagree with that completely, and I think the manager does as well. And he also said, they've scored 60% of their set-piece goals. We've conceded 40% of ours from set pieces. So he said to be a point off is not actually too bad. And he said generally on the way that Liverpool are performing, we played 10 games, won 7, lost 3, and the 3 we lost by very close margins, which again, he's right to point out really. And I think the manager's right not to kind of, you will see this from supporters, you will see it from, the media in general. I can't rail against the media, I'm absolutely part of it, but I think you will, see it from those who are not maybe close to things, is that, a bit of head loss really, and a bit of kind of going over the top in the criticism of Liverpool. But I think the manager, he has to keep a cool head. There's no point him going into the players and completely smashing the confidence by saying they're useless. He's got to find the positives from the performances, and as much as people want to deny it, I think there were positives there. So I totally understand why he's approaching it in that way, and I think he's right to do that, because look, this team, you could see it one of two ways, that Liverpool are just going to get worse forever now, or that they're not a million miles away, and those fine margins, when they click, they will go in Liverpool's favour. And I'm certainly more on that mindset, not least because, it's Manchester United up next, and I think they're getting talked up as almost kind of close to favourites for this game in some quarters, because they won their last game before the international break. It's so kind of, the recency bias is there, and they've still got massive issues. Liverpool's biggest issue is Liverpool have got all these problems, and yet they're 1 point off top spot. Manchester United have a resurgent apparently, and they're in mid-table, so there's still a huge gap between these sides. I think this is a really good opportunity for Liverpool to prove that, and I think the manager maybe sees it that way, judging from some of his comments in this press conference and talking about kind of defending the players and not going over the top in the criticism. He was asked about Cucurella's comments on Mo Salah not defending down that side and Chelsea scoring through that, and again, I really like what he said about this. He said, yeah, he's right, they did score down that side, but he said, I could have also showed you 5 or 6 moments where Mo could have made the difference for us. And this is one of the things that's really been lost in the discussion about this, that I find frustrating, really, I think, to kind of read, is that people make football seem so simple in terms of, well, if you just had someone on that right-hand side who defended, you'd be absolutely fine, or, football is trade-offs. That is the entire game summed up, is trade-offs. And the trade-off last season was, okay, Mo Salah doesn't defend too much down that side, and then he gives you the best individual season in Premier League history. Now, that trade-off, it's not just that it's not working this season and okay, well, we should scrap it, Mo Salah should be dropped or whatever. At the end of the day, there were moments, as the manager points out in that game, where that trade-off could have worked for Liverpool. If Mo Salah side-foots that one in that Wirtz sets him up for, then Liverpool probably go on and win the game, and everybody says, well, the trade-off works. Or I tell you what, nobody actually talks about the trade-off at all. They don't even consider it. But because Cucurella highlighted it after the match, but it just kind of shows you, really, I think it's too easy to get sucked into narratives, or that there's this perfect out of possession setup that Liverpool could have, or any team could have. That's not how the game works. There's always trade-offs. You're always going to be outnumbered in a certain part of the pitch. And if you want to take advantage of outnumbering your opposition in certain parts of the pitch, that's how it works. You've got to accept those trade-offs. So I think some of the criticism around that has been a little bit too heavy, and I think the manager would agree with that as well. And I think obviously the perfect antidote to that would be Mo Salah scoring a couple of goals against Manchester United, as he typically does, by the way. And of course, Liverpool bouncing back from 3 defeats by getting a big result against their big rivals, because no matter how much United are struggling, this is always the biggest game in English football, isn't it? So I think the manager seems ready for that. I think the players are coming back confident after the international break, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how they get on in that regard. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Of course, I will be at Anfield on Sunday, and I'm really looking forward to it. Always a privilege to cover these big games, and I just fancy Liverpool to get a result, I have to say. I don't think it's been as bad as been made out. I think that this is the time where maybe we see the best of them. They start to click and really start to motor towards, as the season really gets into kind of the main part of the campaign. So very, very much looking forward to that. And as I say, I'll be there at Anfield for my post-match review at full time. Looking forward to that. In the meantime, if you can subscribe, I would really appreciate that. And I'll see you guys from Anfield on Sunday.